Please stand by. We're about to begin. Good day and welcome to the DRGR Reports Module conference call. Today's call is being recorded. At this time, I'd like to turn the conference over to Ms. Jeannie Cuneo. Please go ahead.
Thanks so much and welcome, everyone. Yes, you're at today in our DRGR Reports Module, or aka MicroStrategy webinar. We welcome you to that. We know some of you have some problems getting in, and we appreciate your patience with that. And we have a great turnout today, so it looks like everyone was able to get in that needed to. Our speakers for today, unfortunately, our DRGR guru out there, Mark Mitchell, is ill today, so we have our other DRGR gurus from HUD, Ryan Flannery and Jim Earden, are here on the phone, as well as Hunter Hertz from HUD, and then myself, Janine Cuneo from ICF. To pause for a moment, we are going to be taking questions at the end of the presentation, and we're going to leave quite a substantial amount of time for questions for both what you've heard today, any questions you have reports. If you have any other questions about DRGR, we're also happy to take those questions and be able to respond. And if we don't have the immediate answers, we will get back to you shortly. Vinny, can I go ahead and ask you to tell people how to ask questions via this service?
Sure. So if you have a question, you can change your feedback box from green to purple, which is on the top of your live meeting screen, and that will alert us that you have a question. So we'll ask questions in two forms. You can either hit *1 on your phone, and that'll put you into the queue, and when we ask for phone questions, we'll be taking those. And it's by first name only, so we'll keep it sort of anonymous. And if you're in the queue and your question has already been asked, just hit *2 to remove yourself from the queue. And also you can ask questions via the live meeting Q&A box, which we will be monitoring, and we'll take questions that way. So that's it.
Great. Thanks, Vinny. We're going to go ahead and jump right in. We're going to talk a lot today about what is MicroStrategy and what is the reports module, how are they useful to you, and also we're going to do our best to talk with you guys about, are you using these reports and how do you use them, especially how do you address some common problems we're going to identify. So first, let me just back up. You might have heard of this thing called MicroStrategy, or MSTR. Sometimes you'll see that around in the DRGR world. And I just wanted to pause to make sure everyone knows what that is. It's actually an external software to DRGR. You may notice when you click on the reports section of DRGR, it actually opens up to a separate screen. And basically what this software system does, it enables you as the user to pull data that you've entered into DRGR onto an external software for analysis. And then within that MicroStrategy platform, you're again allowed to pull that information off into a PDF or an Excel document for further manipulation and analysis, as well as record keeping. So it's quite a powerful tool if you think about it on how it can be useful to you. Basically, it tells your story. It tells the story you have entered into DRGR, which is communicated to HUD, to your field office reps, and as well as to the general public, and it really tells you it by the numbers. So it gives you short and succinct storylines for you to evaluate. I think it also helps, and this is a place where I know many grantees, when they use it, really find great value, is it assists you in troubleshooting your problems as well as identifying issues. Many times when I talk to grantees, or I know when Ryan or Jim talks to grantees, the first thing we do is pull reports. It is a great tool for us to be able to look at, and this is a tool that you have as well. So we want to make sure you know how to use this to empower yourself to solve some of those nagging problems you might be seeing in DRGR, but not exactly sure what the exact issue is. So let's just talk it through for a second. So the reports module, our purpose here is a quick and easy way of accessing the most up-to-date information. I want to make sure I hone in on that. It is literally pulling information as of today. So if, for example, you did a drawdown yesterday and it got approved and went through the system, then today that is the information it will show. It does not show you last week draw information. So I want to make sure that's very clear. It does up-to-the-minute information. The only time you might see an exception to that is it's a report that is looking at a QPR, what maybe you had in a QPR over time. So there might be a column that says, for example, third quarter QPR, and it gives you some data metrics around that. So unless it really is calling out a specific point in time around a QPR entry, other than that, it really tells you a cumulative analysis. HUD Field Office, this is a tool for you as well. You can examine financial information, accomplishments, as well as user account information, who you need to certify and when. It's a great tool for that. It also can help you determine your action plan or QPR review status per grantee that you have in your fold. Grantees, this is where you can also examine your financial information, your accomplishments, and user account information. Not only can you look at your own user account information, but you can also see, for example, if you're the admin user and you need to certify people and you're not sure when the next certifications are going to come up, you're able to see in the system when you need to next recertify people, as well as who was already recertified. It's a great tool for that type of work. I do want to point out which reports you can access will vary based on the type of account you have. And I want to say that very clearly. It's not just people might have different reports if you're the field office versus a grantee, but even different grantee users might have different access points as well. So you always want to make sure when you're talking about the reports that you're looking at, that you're making it clear which report you've pulled down and what information you're seeing. Also, and most importantly, this is an optional module in DRGR. It's not mandatory. Again, it's something that can help you in your ability to tell your story and communicate clearly to HUD. So it's an optional module, but I do advise you to look at it and use it for yourself. Before we go further, I always like to stop and just double check we're all on the basics here. We have these 4 modules. We have your admin module, your action plan, your drawdowns, and your QPRs, which are all modules within DRGR specifically. And those are really the modules that the reports information pulls data out of. And you'll notice a lot of time the information you're seeing in the report pulls some information that you put in the drawdown module as well as the action plan module. So it doesn't, it allows you, based on the report, to pull information out of any module in the system, and it's not specific. You don't pull a report and it just will give you the drawdown. It is able to cross all modules and is able to give you that comprehensive analysis. So how do we access reports? People often ask me that, not realizing that you go straight to DRGR and you're in DRGR and you're looking at your menu, and you can go onto the reports module and it, again, will pop up a new screen. And that new screen will show you a DRGR account. Many of you out there also do IDIS, and so you might be familiar with using IDIS. You'll see both DRGR access point as well as an IDIS access point here. The next screen you get after you choose DRGR is some different report options you can have, and this is basically what I call kind of your menu here. We're going to talk extensively about the shared reports option. But I wanted to just highlight a couple of other things. You can do your own reports in this My Reports folder. And you're able to kind of classify which information you want to get out of DRGR and get those reports pulled for yourself. I personally enjoy and like the canned reports that HUD has set up for you in the system, which is under the Shared Reports tab. But I've often used My Reports if I'm trying to get some specific information that one of the canned reports doesn't hold for me. The other 2 areas you might want to look at here is your history list. If you save and put in your history your reports, again, you have to save it into a history. If you do that, you can then easily look at your history list and be able to grab reports that way. The other place is you actually can subscribe to certain reports and keep those in the My Subscriptions folder. There is a timeout phase. There is a time. At one time it was 45 days. And Jen or Ryan, do you know what the time is, the day period it is for the subscriptions that stay in that folder?
Yeah, well, when you subscribe to something, you're subscribing to the format that you've created, and there is no limit as long as you keep going back to keep pulling reports. But every time you go in there, it's a new one.
Oh, okay, great.
It's My Reports where you can save a report, and if you don't export it to to a PDF or Excel file, then I believe it's 30 days and it will disappear.
Thank you. We're going to talk pretty extensively about our shared reports files here, and there's two basic types of shared reports, and these are really those canned reports I talked about that HUD is able to, that HUD has provided to you, that you can access on multiple different report options. We're going to talk both about the public and the standard reports today, giving a lot of airtime to the standard here. But let me start by talking a little bit about the difference between the two. So the standard reports are similar to basically spreadsheets, and they use tracking and quality control with reports, and they contain the data for a grantee at basically project and activity level as well as your grant level. And these are really the most commonly used reports by grantees as well as field offices, et cetera. So these are kind of your bread and butter. There's a huge list of canned reports now in there that you're able to pull out and utilize to evaluate what you put into DRGR. The public reports are different. They're really interactive charts and graphs, and they help show progress by grants, activity categories, or grantee projects. And they basically, I think about them as a financial dashboard report as well as a trend analysis. And those can be accessed by all users, and they are able to look at it both. They can look at, for example, NSP1 across an entire region. If you want to see how your region is doing towards your expenditure deadline in NSP1, if you want to look at nationally, you can do that as well. There's a variety of things you can pull out of the public report, but think of these more as your financial dashboard report. We're going to give some examples of that a little bit later on, but we're going to go straight into standard reports. And now, the three major types of standard reports are administrative reports, financial reports, and performance reports. And they literally in the system are called admin report, FIN, F-I-N, FIN report, and PERF, P-E-R-F reports. And each one of those categories have a multitude of different canned reports you can access. And intuitively, by their name, the administrative reports really dive into the user information, your action plan, and QPR status. The FIN reports talk about all of the financials that you put in there, from your budgets and your disbursements, cumulative financial data, as well as quite a bit of invoice line items. And then your performance reports are talking about the beneficiaries you've entered, accomplishments you've entered, including addresses, for example. So think about those when you're looking at reports, which one you want to use based on those categories. Let me walk through some of the highlights of each one of those categories. This is just a snapshot of some of the admin reports that you might see when you go into your standard report. It's important to note that not only do they give a title for each one of the admin reports, they also give you a little bit of a synopsis so you're able to digest these. I find that sometimes it's very hard to try a couple of them to see the difference, for example, between a 4A and a 4B, etc. So there's quite a different options you may use. Additionally, HUD does update these from time to time. They update these either because new functionality has come to the system and they realize the grantee might need a new report on, for example, the program income accounts. That was a new report that was added based on the December enhancements to DRGR. You might also make changes to these reports because there might have been a system error. That has happened most recently. Actually, as of this morning, I was told that a few reports in admin have been refreshed and updated because they were pulling some wrong information. So I just want to give you guys a heads up on that. You always, when you pull it, just double check a few things, and if you see any errors, please let HUD know those errors so they can go in there quickly and make those adjustments. Here's an example of one of the reports I really like. It's Admin Report 04B. Often we get from grantees, my account has expired, but I'm not sure what to do or who to tell. I am a drawdown approver, but I need to leave for a couple of weeks. Who else is a drawdown approver in the system, etc. An Admin Report 04B really lists the information per individual and their profiles in the system. So an example here is we can look at Mr. Sanchez, and not only gives you his email access, but also tells you his recertification status hasn't expired. So if he needs to get recertified, he needs to access and or The admin user needs to look this up and be able to figure out who that person needs to expire. It also talks about the date in which recertifications are coming up and who the approver is for that recertification. A lot of times as well, grantees aren't sure when something expires, who do I actually talk to? And this is the type of report that will help grantee be able to analyze who they need to talk to. Another great part of this report, as you see, is our system role way on the right-hand side. That system role is essential in understanding who is with the especially when a grantee might be in a bit of a crisis, i.e. their drawdown requester has, is ill and is not in the office, but they still need to go through and draws happening. They need to find who's the backup drawdown requester. This is a great report to pull in order to be able to
provide information code, speaker's name, or the title of your conference.
Here's an example of some of the financial or fin reports that you've seen.
The DRGR Reports Module
is this FRIN Report 2A. This tells you basically your voucher status.
2905.
Many a time grantees say, I'm a drawdown of my requester and I send that request over and I'm not sure what the status is. They can easily go into a FIN report and pull that in.
290.
Or they make some revisions into a voucher and are not exactly sure what they did now. It's a great report to be able to pull and get all the accurate information. They can reconcile that against their own internal accounting system.
Okay, and your first and last name was spelling, please?
Alfredo, A-L-F-R-E-D-O. Last name Duran, D-U-R-A-N.
Report that gives all
your company name as well?
At the
City of Miami.
For your grant funds that you budgeted, obligated, including your program income that you received and dispersed per activity. So it's a very comprehensive picture of your financial records for each grant. Some additional reports that I also like is this 5B. Again, I mentioned that at times I will add to this list of FIN reports as needed, and 5B is a new add. It's the program income account summary. And for those of you who have made program income accounts based on your need, again, those are not mandatory, those are based on how your program is designed and your needs. So those of you that have done that, this is a good summary report that will give you per account budgets and allocations as well as your balances. And it will not include any activities that are not assigned to a program income account. So it's a very narrow and specific summary report for you. And lastly, 7B. FIN Report 7B is a good one. It does not include program income, but it does include your program funds that you've drawn, as well as your entire activity line item budgets and obligations. So another good report for you to get a comprehensive picture of your financial health of each grant you have. Just wanted to give you an example of that 5B report. You'll notice here there is no information from MicroStrategy that is not included in those little summary tables. So those summary tables are very illustrative for you. That 5B summary table talked about the activity type and activity number, as well as it gave you the different metrics in which are going to be assigned. You'll notice that there is a word right in the middle of the screen that says metrics. And I want you guys to notice that right here I'm circling. Everything to the right of that are the metrics in which is used, the information is pulled out of DRGR4. So on the left-hand side are the delineating factors, i.e. activity types and activity numbers. And the metrics on the right is per each activity type, what is the data metrics that they have pulled for that. So for activity number B, EDC, LMMI, for example, in this grantee, all the metrics that they've pulled are the 5 different financial metrics that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. Your grant funds budgeted, your grant funds obligated, also those that have been dispersed, and your 2 program income data sets which are received and dispersed. This is a crucial element for you to understand when you decide to start manipulating your reports, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, how you can modify your reports. But understanding that per each line item, i.e. in this case your activity type and activity number, there is a series of metrics that this MicroStrategy report pulled for you, and you're able to manipulate those as you want. And then the last type of standard report is called the performance or the PERF report. There are three main ones that I find grantees often use. Is the first one, which is your projected versus cumulative totals of those measures that you're using. Measures include number of owner households, number of renter households, number of single-family housing units. So those are really key information that you put in that it was able to tell you not only what you projected in your action plan, but remember you project performance measures at the action plan stage, but then also what you have demonstrated as meeting a national objective, which is what you do in your at your QPR. Performance Report 3 goes back through all of your past QPRs, and it gives you all the addresses you've entered by activity and responsible organization. Many of you have talked to us about how you've put addresses in incorrectly. Either you put them in too early, it hadn't been a national objective, or you might have put an error into those. This is a great place for you to be able to evaluate those, be able to see kind of what is in there, what isn't. So you can, unfortunately right now you're not able to go back and change those addresses yet in DRGR, but you're always able to put any narrative you would want in the system so that you're always feeling up to date on any past errors you might have done on these addresses. Lastly is this Performance Report 6. This pulls information again from your QPR that you've entered into your QPR about your beneficiary statistics. So the distribution of households by race and ethnicity and Hispanic status, or female-headed household. All that type of information that you have put in your QPR, those that have met your national objective, you're able to pull that information right from that Perf Report 06. Just to give you an example of one of these, here is Perf Report 01, pulled from a grantee. And I wanted to just highlight a couple of things here. Again, you're seeing on the left-hand side the line items in which they're going to determine the pulls by, which is your activity number and activity type. Then you have your measurements and your measure category. So right here, our measure categories are low, mod, and total. And our metrics we're using are the projected versus the actual per each one of those measure categories. So see here, this grantee, I'm just going to take the first activity that they're doing, which is the O2 Home Ownership Assistance. They have told us that they have their number of households, total households, number of housing units, and then they delineated the housing units by single-family housing units in this activity. And you're able to see in this grantee that they have not only projected 9 owner households for mod, but they've also hit those, so meaning they have met a national objective for each one of those households that they projected.
Can I jump in real quick?
Please.
Okay, this is Ryan with HUD. And one thing that we've discussed in several of the trainings that we've done across the country is when we're measuring, accomplishments. So when we're looking at what's been done, we call it the unit level, for a unit level count. We're looking at the number of households. So if you want to be, and we can probably get more into this when we get into the page buys and the different functionality of the system. But keep in mind the number of households is what HUD uses to get an accurate count of units. And that's for several reasons. We're not going to get into all of that right now. But we look at the number of households as opposed to the number of housing units or number of single-family units and so on. Just wanted to put that out right now. Maybe we can get a little bit more into it later.
Thanks, Ryan. That's really great for grantees to know and understand exactly what you guys are looking for when you pull your own data sets up at headquarters. I want to talk a little bit about the functionality of the MicroStrategy. We're going to talk then about how to modify some of the reports, and then we've also provided some videos. I know a lot of people talk to me about how it's a little bit difficult to follow webinars screenshot by screenshot. So what we've done is we've also built some videos out for you guys. We'll show them today. They're literally 30 seconds each, and I'll talk through them. But then you also will be able to view them off of the NSP Resource Exchange website and can go back to those at any time necessary. And just gives you a little example based on a real-life scenario on how you can get to the report and modify reports if need be. So some common modifications that users perform: they like to move and sort their columns. They like to group columns together. And then they also like to add filters as they need. There's kind of three main ways to modify reports. There are many, many more. A lot of people enjoy MicroStrategy because they kind of make it their own. So don't be shy. Think, go ahead and just dive right in and try different things. It doesn't hurt anything in DRGR. Remember, you are off DRGR when you're in MicroStrategy. So if you group something together and you didn't want that group together, it does nothing to your data in DRGR. So feel free and comfortable to use it. Some ways you can modify the reports is you can use the ribbon below. And here's all the information on this ribbon here. We're going to talk about a few of them. You can also drag objects between columns. And then you also can often use a right-click over an object and you get different options available. And those are just a few of the ways you can modify reports. There are more ways. We'll give you another few examples as we keep going. I just wanted to go over a few of the key items on this ribbon. There's a subscribe icon for you to use. The key to, which I highlighted here, is you can export, and this is how you export to an Excel or to a PDF. Excel comes on the left and PDF is on the right. Those seem to be the most vital for folks. You can also swap rows and columns in order for you to see and analyze information in a different way. And you also can do tons of different stylistic changes that you would like, both in font and size, as well as grouping things. So there are quite a few options. I highly recommend that when you're in, grab Spin Report 5B and check out a few of these. We're going to give an example later, too, on them. Additionally, there is on the top here the File, View, Data, and Format. Those include some of the icons you see in the ribbon, but there are also different information here, too. So I recommend also going through those and checking those out. We're going to give some examples that I use the most today. An example I do a lot of is I move columns around. You can move columns both from the metrics side of things on the right-hand side or any of the activity information, line item information on the left-hand side. Some ways you can move columns. Again, you can, what I did here, which was right-click, and the little call-out box opens up, and you're able to move things around. This one I chose to move right, for example. So you're easily able to do that. Another item you can do is sort. Again, here we right-clicked here and showed, and I decided to sort by right-clicking on top of, literally on top of the category. You also see, I'm going to show you under activity number right here, you can also move around and move items this way. The first two icons here allow you to move things back and forth, move these columns left and right. The icon that basically shows that little arrow that is pointing upwards actually moves that entire column on up to this page by. And we're going to talk a little bit about this page by in a second. So another way is sorting your columns. You can sort in multiple layers. Many people say, I don't want to just sort one metric, i.e. program income received. I want to sort by program income received and then by activity number and then by some other element. So you can do this in several ways. You go up to the sort by icon that is highlighted here in red, and it will pop up this window, and it allows you 3 tiers to sort by. And it's a great use as if you're needing to do some deep analysis on different reports you're pulling. Here's the page by. This is an element I really want people to get used to. You'll notice where the red ball is circling, you'll see this word page by. If it does not automatically come up for you, many grantees, when you pull a report in MicroStrategy, this ribbon on page by automatically comes up. If it does not, you're going to need to go up into the view. The view here, go ahead and left click on that, and page by is an option, and you want to click on page by, and it will now show up. Page by, what this page by does basically for you is it filters the information that is used in a report. The first filter that's applied to this is the grant status. For example, here it's active. There might be, maybe you have a grant that is inactive or a grant that is closed out. There might be different grants, especially for those of you that have more than MSP. You also have disaster recovery funds. You might have a continuum of where your grant statuses are. So the first delineating factor on the page by is active. So all of the grant information we have here is active. Then you're able to do it by grantee. some of you out there who are only associated with one grant, for example, if you're the state of Georgia and you're only accessing the state of Georgia information, you might not have this page by option. Again, each of these are elements that are associated with you as your user account. This MicroStrategy report is by a user that has multiple access to multiple grantees, and so they're able to go ahead and page by and find the grantee that they would like to do some analysis on. Then grant number. This is essential for many of you out there that now have more than one MSP grant, as well as those that might have disaster recovery grants. If you do not do a page by this grant number, you may be seeing a report that shows NSP1, NSP2, and NSP3 information, and that could really confuse your analysis if you're not wanting to look at all three grants together. So the way in which you're able to pull information up to page by are two things. One, many of the reports already have automatic filters on them, and those will be located in this page by. So automatically in this example here, the grantee status, the grantee, and the grant number are already automatically part of the canned report. And the example here is I decided, well, you know what, I also want to filter by activity type. And it's very easy. You're going to go ahead and just left click on activity type and drag it. Keep your left click down. You're going to drag it up to the page by. If you notice here, this yellow bar comes up. You go ahead and unclick, and it enters right there, and your entire report regroups, or sorry, filters that by your activity type. So here it is. We filtered it by activity type, and now you no longer see activity type below, but rather you're now able to filter. So this report right now only shows the activity types for this grantee for a specific grant number that are activity types homeownership assistance or low and moderate income. If, for example, you wanted to see activity types of rehabilitation, rehab that you have, you're able to go ahead and right-click on this arrow right here, and you're able to filter out by that activity type. Another item is many times people like to group columns together, and in order to group the columns together, you're going to have to go ahead and click one way, an easy way to do this. Click on the category in which you're wanting to group things by, and you can go ahead and move, and you're going to move to columns. You notice by moving to columns, we moved on the right-hand side, again, the right-hand side of the metrics, and now we're showing per each activity column. Again, this is an activity for them, which is O2 Homeownership Assistance Walk-in Program. We're able to see the grant funds budgeted, obligated, dispersed, program income received, and program income dispersed. Basically, what we've done here is we have now changed. I'm going to go back one screen for a second, guys. So we have moved this from the entire activity type of grant funds budgeted and obligated, the information you could get to see on the screen. We're now moving these two activity numbers, which is O2 and O8, and we're now going to move them so that now they became a category under the metrics. And you'll notice here, we're able to do some good analysis per each activity type that we've already filtered in the page by. We're able to see this type of information. You notice here I added a few different elements here. We have both a page by going on, as well as we're moving columns around. In doing so, again, I highly suggest you play around with this a little bit. You're able to find many different analysis points to serve both your own purposes as an individual user on what has been entered into the system, but also you'll find that I'm sure many of you out there are either requesting reports from DRGR or you are the person that needs to pull reports from the system in order to provide that information to your leadership and political leadership. And these are the type of reports you're able to pull very easily and very quickly once you get used to how to manipulate them by the page buys and moving your columns around. Another element of this is you can change things into grids and graphs. We're going to show a very specific example of this that is a little bit more, but one of the easiest ways to do that is you use this view only and go ahead and insert grid and graph. You'll notice here you could do it also just by grid or just by graph. Down below, I wanted to show you both options. You'll see first the graph, And then a little bit below, you're seeing just the beginnings of the grid down here. And this example shows you clearly that you're now able to not just have information in a graph, a grid form, but you're actually now you have the option to graph this out. And there's a lot of different ways you can graph things out. We're going to show you a video on that shortly. So the first video, we're going to specifically answer questions here. These are questions that I talked to many grantees that you guys have as questions for yourselves, and you want to be able to pull this information quickly, and so we've made some examples for you. So the first one, and we're going to do this all in Fin Report 5B, which has become now my favorite financial report because it shows you all activity of financials from per activity for budgets, obligations, program funds dispersed, program income received, and program income dispersed. So it really gives you the financial health of your grant. Vinny, can you go ahead and load into this video for a second, which is the page 5 video? Vinny, are we having some technical difficulties? I see a gray screen. Oh, here we go. Let's try it again. Excuse us.
Can you see the full version now?
I can. Thank you very much, Vinny.
Okay, I'm just going to start it over.
Great. Go ahead and restart this. As you guys can see, this is an example of a MicroStrategy report. And Vinny, go ahead and start this up. What we're seeing, someone clicking through the screen, we're literally seeing it kind of in real-time capture. It's a 5B report. And what they're going to do is show you a page by, where they're going down to the responsible organization, clicking left on that, and as you know, they pull that up to the page by. A yellow item shows up and they unclick it, and now you notice the responsible organization page by. They now have the option to choose which responsible organization they want to use. This is the state of Pennsylvania. Thank you, the state, for letting us use your information. And what they chose to do here was do a responsible organization by the city of Lebanon. And now we're able to see all the Lebanon projects and activities and all the financial information and metrics that is pulled in 5B for this option. So it's a quick and easy delineated option for them to use. Highly recommend, especially for you grantees out there in the states and large NSP2 grantees, that you utilize the page by when you're trying to do analysis in the specifics per each responsible organization, for example, as you just saw. So that was a good opportunity where you saw how much PI is a subrecipient generating, and for example, they showed you the city of Philadelphia by pulling that page by up. Vinny, let's go to the second question now. And this question is going to be, how easily can we see which activity generated the most program income? I often get that information. Someone's wanting to reconcile against their records, and they're thinking, I got to make sure I say X city or X responsible organization is receiving this much program income. I want to make sure of this. I want to make sure this activities I've done this correctly. In doing so, I'm showing you real time again. Let's go ahead and start that, Vinny. What we've done here, again, this is Financials 5B, and thanks again, State of Pennsylvania, we're using their information. We've gone ahead to the programming. You see the arrow there. They went in and clicked on that upside-down triangle, and they literally they clicked on that once, and you're able to see that now by sort by ascending. In doing so, you scroll down, and you see the program income received now. Stars was 948,097, which is the largest amount of program income received by the activity. Again, that was very simple and very easy, but you'll notice in DRGR you're able to just quickly click into that. You pull that 5B report, you quickly click onto that opportunity into that upside-down arrow, and you're easily able to see a sort by program income. And let's go to the next slide, the next video. This video is going to be how can I provide data to my CPD rep as a nice graph to show our progress. I know oftentimes your perhaps political representative or your CPD rep is looking for additional information, and instead of you having to pull all the information out and do a lot of the manipulation of it, the reports module will actually help and provide much of that information for you. And one way they're able to do that through a graph opportunity. Let's go ahead and start this Vinny for us. And this graph opportunity is, again, using the state affiliate information. And we're going to do it by responsible organization. You notice you just pulled the responsible organization up to the page by, and now is clicking on the page by sort by City of Philadelphia, because we're going to look at the City of Philadelphia information. By doing so, we captured all the activities that have the responsible organization of the City of Philadelphia. We went ahead and clicked on the grid or graph icon, and we're able to sort and do some different items here. One item here is moving this around from, this is now just a grid. There's no graph anymore. It's just going to be this is just a graph. There's no gridding anymore. Another option you can do is change around this series. Now we have on the bottom column all the funds by budget and obligation and disbursement. Another option you can do is actually change the graph type to horizontal versus vertical. As you notice, that doesn't look so good. It doesn't make a lot of sense, so we're going to move it back to vertical. Many, many different types of options you have in the graph that you can use. And then you can go ahead and here's the option where if you want to print this out and or save it, you're able to do so, and you can PDF it and get some different options. You could do it fit to one page, portrait or landscape it. So there's quite a few options you can do when you want to print your graph as well. I just gave you a couple examples on how to make a grid or a graph that works your needs. In this case, again, we use the state of Pennsylvania, and they wanted just to look at the City of Philadelphia and be able to evaluate how much program income has received to date from that example. And we're able to show vertically it made a lot of sense, horizontally it didn't look so great, etc. So you can make a lot of different options there. The last report we're going to look at, we're going to modify, is how can I separate financial information by activity type? This is a great way of how do you move columns around. So let's go ahead and click on that for me, Vinny. And in this example here, we have the user moving around her activity type. As you notice, that's the third column. She's gone ahead and used that little arrow and pushed it up, that little arrow that says up. A processing request shows up in DRGR. By doing so, you notice now we have the activity types in as a metric category. And now we're able to see clearance and demo, how much information. You'll notice that this column will way over to the right. She even used the arrow button and moved it further, and we're able to see even more. Now we have rehab and reconstruction and construction and housing. There are 3 pages to this, quite a bit. So most likely they're going to want to export this into an Excel document so they're able to do further analysis. So they went ahead and exported it into an Excel. There are many different options you could do. One is, for example, Excel with formatting. And you'll go ahead and hit that, and it will come up as a Excel document. All of these videos are going to be posted on the Learning Center for you to look at it in your own time. They'll be also part of the thank you email that comes out tomorrow that thanks you for attending this webinar, and we will have links to it as well there. So these are both on the NSP Resource Exchange within the YouTube, as well as will be part of the email and the Learning Center. So I recommend highly you look at those so you can literally see in real time how a grantee moves within how a user moves within the reports module, especially looking at the graphs and how do you move metrics around so you can evaluate your program based on a series of different categories and metrics that you may like. Moving forward, just talking a little bit of how you save your reports. You can save it to your My Reports section. In doing so, you're saving that specific information that you wanted to have in there and that you're creating. You also can save your history list. As you notice, by adding this history list, we're seeing that they've already saved 3 different reports to this history list. And lastly, you can subscribe to reports. You're going to go ahead and click on the link under the report title. And this is all within shared reports. You want to select add your subscription, and you can also specify the frequency you get the reports. Why is this essential or important for a grantee? I highly recommend for a grantee that maybe would like to see at the end of every month exactly the data that they had in the system at that time. By doing so, for example, if you save your FIN Report 5B monthly, then you'll always know how information is happening over time. So if you find a glitch or an error happening in a couple months from now, you're able to go back and kind of see the trend and where that happened. I find that very useful information because, again, on average, the majority of the DRGR reports gives you current, accurate information as of today. It doesn't go back in time. You can't ask for a report that says, for example, as of January 3rd, what is my financial information? The system will not do that today for you. So this provides you with an ability to specify your frequency for a report, and so you're always able to access reports at specific times. Lastly, you guys saw a little bit in the video. I just wanted to highlight it a bit more, is on how to export reports. You can export a report by selecting this report, and you only have to access one. Oh, excuse me. I apologize. Let me do that again. You can go ahead and, when you see all the CAN reports show up for you, you can click on this and you can go ahead and export it. If you do so, though, it only allows you access to one grant at a time, and many grantees want to be able to delineate which grant they actually want to export. In so doing, I highly recommend that you actually enter into the report so you can then page by the grant number that you like, and then you can export it. And these are the 2 icons, the Excel and the PDF, that you have access to for exporting. One item is I wanted to highlight is the different options that you have in exporting, specifically in Excel. I've chosen here Excel with formatting. To do that, there's a lot of merging that happens in the system. And so if you want to manipulate things, you'll have to unmerge those cells once you get it into an Excel document. If you don't want to play around with that unmerging, you can always Excel with a plain text. It gives you the exact same information. I would say it's just not as in a pretty format. So it matters what your end user needs. Let's go to public reports. We've talked the entire time about standard reports today. And those standard reports, again, are those CAN reports that HUD has developed for you. Again, they give you so many that it really is a great go-to resource for you. And it gives you the different metrics and line items in which you can pull information from. Your public reports, they're a little bit different. They give you those dashboards. They give you, for example, bar charts showing budgets versus balance by grant, project, or activity categories. They also give you quarterly expenditure analysis, and that shows you graphs showing quarterly disbursements by grant, project, or activity category. Let me show you the example of the financial update dashboard that you see here on the screen. And this report provides tables that detail the amount of funds by a grant, a project, or an activity category. So you have some options there. And then the bar chart below shows a table that illustrates these disbursements and the amount of funds remaining by each of these groupings. And in fact, I feel like this bar chart really helps the user see the relative amount of funding across the groupings and how much progress has been made by each individual group. So, for example, we have here in blue how much community that has been dispersed for the acquisition and rehab program, for example. But also shows you the balance towards the budget that you have set up for that activity. It's very useful for you to be able to see your progress that you've done and your dashboard of that. You want to know here you're able to do this by region, region detail. This one I just did as a grant project detail, but you're also able to do it by activity category detail. There's a lot of different options and mutations you can do here. A quarterly disbursement analysis. This is the second type of public report that's available to you. This report provides basically your snapshot of progress, and it gives you analysis that breaks the disbursements down across quarters using data from your QPRs. And this allows you to examine spending trends, again, by your grant or your project or your activity categories across the life of the grant. This is I find vital, especially when you're talking to principals or political leadership, in order to see your trend over time. Again, we just grabbed one example a few years ago, and it's able to show us what's happening per the different category details, for example, acquisition, disposition, admin, housing, land banking. And you have options here where you don't need to show all of the categories, but you're able to choose what categories you want, as well as, which we did not do here, a total. You're able to also show the total progress that's happening over time. Again, I find these dashboard reports to be excellent resources for you to have. A quick, easy access of all that work that you do in DRGR. You don't need to duplicate that when you need to provide information to your political leadership or your directors. This is a great resource for you to be able to get all that information you put in DRGR out in an easily accessible and very clear graphs and trend analysis. Again, these are the public reports, not the standard, but the public reports. How to save these? Couple ways. You can right-click over the chart and graph and then just save it as a picture, or you can go up into your ribbon and save up here. There's a couple different ways to save these reports. I'm going to spend a few minutes on some common issues that reports can help solve, and then we're going to get to our Q&A. Some of the common problems around kind of four major areas. One is the accomplishment data and corrections that you kind of need to have, that you may need to do, either because you've entered information into QPR in the past wrong, or getting error messages, and you're just kind of stuck. I find reports an excellent resource in order to help you dissect some of this. Other areas for common problems is it helps you evaluate your compliance. The specific items, i.e. that how are you doing towards your 10% cap on admin, for example. How are you doing for those NSPT grantees that just met your 50% expenditure? You can pull reports periodically year to year to see what HUD is looking at and making sure that you're in compliance with that. And it tells HUD your story as well. So it's not just for compliance, but also can tell HUD your story. So, for example, if HUD is reading a QPR and saying this doesn't work or make sense, you can also pull a report and see where that issue is, how you're telling HUD your story, and how you can tell it in a different way. Other common problems are currently with most recent updates is estimated program income and adjusting budgets. And lastly, and always, is a lot of people have administrative issues, and reports that can be a resource for you there. Dive into the accomplishment data information. So really, I find accomplishment data is always in your PERF or performance reports, and this is useful when a grantee is attempting to gather the information that they've entered into all of their past QPRs. So instead of having to pull down each individual QPR and trying to bring together information across all your QPRs, your reports module will do that for you, especially for those of you that have been doing NSP1 for quite some time. You've turned in quite a few QPRs, so you have a lot of information you've entered in there, and sometimes it's hard for you to know each and every data point you put in there across all the QPRs. Your reports modules can do that for you. So it can tell you what addresses you've already entered, and can tell you the information that you've put in specific to race and ethnicity, about the beneficiaries to your program, and also you can talk about all the current accomplishment information for my activities, i.e. those household information that Ryan mentioned earlier is really essential, and you can see those through the reports. So to answer the first question, kind of what addresses have I already entered? PERF Report 03 is by the QPR. It pulls in all the addresses by activity as well as by responsible organization, and you'll notice way on the right-hand side, it tells you the report period in which this information was entered into. So quite a robust information, very, very helpful. Some of you out there are doing a lot of geocoding and work like that. This is the type of report that can help you with that.
And let me, if I could, stop in real quick on this one as well, because this is a really useful report for us here at HUD. But what we do with this is we go through a process of standardization of these addresses, and then we remove duplicates. So, there have been different forms of guidance over the couple of years with NSP. When do you enter an address? grantees were entering acquisitions upon the acquisition. Others were doing it, once you, as part of maybe a rehab. Bottom line is there's double counting, sometimes triple counting in a file. So if you were to pull this and say, okay, well, we have 123 Main Street in here 3 times, you might have only done one rehab at that address, but you might have had a rehab, a disposition, and a demo or something. So in that, it's something to be mindful of, but it's something that we are mindful of, and we do take we go through steps to clean the data up. So if you see reports coming out, it's usually the reports that come out after we do a cleanup. But I just wanted to kind of get that out there because I think it's important that this is there could be double counting in this report, and there is.
Thanks, Ryan. I think a lot of grantees will be happy to hear that. They feel that an error at the beginning, they might have put an address in multiple times over the 2 or 3 QPRs by accident. So I know they'll be happy to hear that you guys are doing that type of deduping or deduplication.
Right, and I've gotten that question a lot when we're out doing our training, so that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Thank you. So again, that Perf Report 03 will give you that information. Perf Report 06 is information, and I wanted to show you guys this one specifically because it helps you give information by beneficiary statistic, by household type. Again, I want to focus you on these items here, which are your metric categories and your metrics. And so it's telling us both your beneficiary categories, which are your household totals, your household renter totals, your household owner totals, your race and ethnicity, which is the second row here, which is all the white, the black, African American, Asian, etc., are all right here in this row. And then lastly, those metrics. And those are actual. Again, what is an actual? An actual is when you enter it into QPR and it meets the beneficiary. And that's when you should be entering it here. And so it's your actual direct benefit that has been met. And this really helps you understand, for example, that you have put for this activity, again, we try to white out some of these activity numbers, but for the activity for the MSP, LMR, rehab, reconstruction, there have been 2 white households that have benefited from the program, and those white households are owners. For the second line for rehab reconstruction for the LH25% set aside, there have been 2 black African American households that have been beneficiaries to the program, and they have been renters. That's the type of information I know a lot of you internally need to have to both reconcile against your records. Very, very important that you can use Perf Report 06 to pull down that information to verify that over the life cycle of your program, over every QPR that you've had, that you've entered in this information correctly and accurately. You're able to do so with this Perf Report 06. A lot of people ask me, I want a report that combines both those measure types, the owner households, and our beneficiary statistics, the race, ethnicity, as well as renters. So there is no one canned report. Again, you can create your report. There's no one canned report. But what I find is you're able to do so by pulling your Perf Report 01 and your Perf Report 06. So this will show me very clearly that we have the number of households are 2, and so we're able to then match those up to your direct benefit activities. So again, we review Perf Report 01 and Perf Report 06. That's how you can see really what I would say your cumulative accomplishment data for each of your activities. We've done quite a bit of webinars and instructions on about how to make corrections to information entered into prior periods, as well as if you get different error messages when you're trying to enter information into QPRs. I recognize and clearly understand that many of you are still struggling with that issue. I just wanted to do, not go into depth in whole on how to correct those things. Please feel free to look at our past webinars. I just wanted to make sure you saw and understood that reports are a great resource here. Perf Report 1 is really an excellent resource that's able to show you what you have entered into the past for both owner household as well as your total household. I want to point out here, this was just a little hint for folks, if you're having an activity that is a direct benefit, I'm going to say that very clearly, a direct benefit and not an area benefit here, you need at least 4 measure types. And that to me is always the clue. Again, if it's a direct benefit, you need at least 4 measure types. You should always have your households, and then you should have defined your household by owner and or renter. Okay, so you need to have both your number of households, which means you've chosen a household, and then also you need to define your household, which will be a second measure type, either by owner or renter. You also need to choose housing units, and then you need to define your housing units by single family or multifamily. This to me is actually so helpful when a grantee says to me, my rep says I don't have all my measure types, but I've looked them all. I pull Perf Report 1 and look at these different measure types for the direct benefit activities. If you don't have these 4, then there's a clear mismatch on what you have in your action plan, and you need to go back and define this better. The one exception here is if you have an area benefit activity. If you have an area benefit activity, you'd actually have as one of your measure types number of persons and have some delineating types around there. So my suggestion here are at least 4 for measure types of direct. The one other element here too is if you're NSP2 or NSP3, you need to have at least 1 green measure as well. So for NSP2 and NSP3, you should have at least 5 measure types to begin with. Many grantees have many, many more. But I'm just giving you the absolute minimum. And many of you have more, and robust data reporting is great. I just want to let you know that this is at least what you need to have. And here's some information. A lot of times people get error messages that relate to race and ethnicity information. One great place to start here is pulling that Perf Report 6. And you're able to do some analysis here to understand per each activity, number and activity type, what did you put in the past, and what kind of information do you need to either put negatives in to take some of that information out or add more in order to true up what is the error message information you need. So many of you can use these reports to talk about compliance as well as telling your story. The biggest compliance one I would say for every single NSP grantee is, are you meeting that 25% set aside? Another one is, are my expenditures lower than my disbursements? And this could be an issue here, and I want to talk about that in a second. And then also, are we using program income before program funds? So let's talk a little bit about this. Number 3 has become less of an issue based on the current December release, which is where DRGR actually forces you to do this. But before you get into a space in DRGR where it's giving you an error message, you can't pull down funds because you have program income on hand, you can actually pull a report and it can help you analyze that. Here's an example, and we did this one on purpose, where we pulled down this report 7B from a grantee into an Excel document, and then we manipulated it in the Excel document. Many grantees say to me, Janine, I don't really like moving my columns within DRGR MicroStrategies, or I don't always like to use a page by. That's fine. One other way you can do this is actually pull that whole report out into an Excel document and start doing some manipulation. So I wanted to show you guys that as an example here. So, for example, if you wanted to find out all of your 25% set aside, we just highlighted those that have the 25% set aside as the national objective and went ahead and added those up to do a quick 25% set aside check in the Excel. And we're at 36% is what we've budgeted. So for budgeting purposes, we're on track. Obviously, we need to hit the disbursements for those, but I always want to make sure at least we've budgeted those. The other example here was too is, are we hitting our expenditure check? Again, these were for those of you out there in NSP2 world that we're constantly thinking about that. You're able to look at activity expenditures and do a quick analysis if you've hit that. And this grantee, for example, is at 56% expenditures. So these are different examples here of how you're able to use a quick report, pull it off of DRGR, and do some of your analysis off of DRGR in an Excel document. I want to just pause for a second around program income. Happy to take additional questions on program income and the release that happened in December. But just wanted to pause and make sure we're all on the same page that Your program income is the first in, first out, and in DRGR now, it is making you pull into that program income. You have some on hand in DRGR. In doing so, we've changed the math rules so that your project and your activity budgets equal your program funds plus your estimated program income. What we find out a lot in talking to grantees is that they're struggling a little bit to find out what their total disbursement is when you pull a report. So I wanted to give a quick example of how you can use a report. You can pull it off of Excel and you can get your total disbursement. So here what we did for the first question is, we pulled this off and we're just going to add up your grant funds dispersed total and your program income dispersed, and you'll get your total funds dispersed per line item. That's one. And then also a lot of questions are, do I have any program income on hand? My records, I'm a little bit confused on my records. I want to see what DRGR is showing. If you look at what's in the box in the red, you're able to see that they do have a couple $100,000 of program income on hand that they're going to need to spend. Again, it's based on how you set up your program. So there's some program income account that you set up. You'll need to review those on what you're going to pull down. And again, there's a great program income account report that you're now able to use in DRGR that can help you analyze that as well. Just one last common problem that we're seeing a lot is that people are still looking to combine budgets. Either they might have done they did acquisition and rehab and split those two apart, and they're wanting to combine that now. Also, we're hearing a lot of people talk about that DRGR doesn't separate program income and program funds for projects and activity budgets, right? It's not all one lump, but they want to keep their own records. Just some quick hints, quick clues for you guys if you are running into these common issues. This is just an example. I'm going to have you guys, again, we're sending out these slides tomorrow and within the email that comes out after each webinar, as well as we'll have it on Learning Center. So this will give you some opportunity to digest this. But what we did here, I just wanted to give you an example of how we pulled a report, a 5B report, into Excel, and then we did some clear data manipulation. So everything you see in the top table is what we pulled off of a report. We added some new columns in order to give some project budgets, and then we're also doing some clear manipulation down below. Let me just walk you through this really quickly. This example is we're trying to collapse this 5B into B sub A. So sorry, we're going to collapse B sub A LMMI into B sub A LH2A5. Many of you have had this issue where you might have incurred costs and disbursements for an LMMI project and realize once you actually sell the projects, you're selling to 25% satisfied beneficiary and want to move those disbursed funds into that 25% set aside. It's a very common problem today. Sometimes it's just as easy, and this example shows you it's just as easy as you can move these disbursements by revising your vouchers. But it's not always easy, and what you really need to do is first evaluate and make sure your LH25 budget is large enough to be able to absorb grant funds budgets from both its own budgets that's been dispersed as well as the budgets from the line item that it's going to get moved from. So the LMMI, which is going to get moved into the LH25, so we have to make sure that $33,000 plus change, plus the $246,000 plus change, plus the program income dispersed, which is the 114,23266, the sum of those are less than your grant funds budget, which if you look at the math we did down here, it is. The sum of those are $394,000 of total grant funds dispersed. That's going to be against your $462,000 of your LH25. So you're going to be easily able to revise each of your vouchers for both program income and program funds, and then appropriately decrease your obligations and budgets for your LMMI, and increase those for your LH25, and you now have one new category, and you can go ahead and delete your LMMI. This is just an example here where I'm just showing you how you can take information off of your report in a quick and easy analysis and be able to finalize that analysis by adding different components of that as you need to for purposes of, for example, in this type, adjusting your budget. This was a very easy example where you didn't have to make any further budget adjustments at the activity level or even at the project budget level. But sometimes these get much more complicated, and in doing so, pulling a report and really step-by-step figuring out what changes you need to make is most advantageous. Another great example here, a lot of people are asking us, hey, is there a way to track my program funds versus my program income funds at the activity and project budgets? Well, not a standard report right now, but what you can do is, again, modify a report. Use your reports for your own purposes and modify it. This is a great example where we entered in multiple columns. We put in here your projected PI by project. We entered this column after, again, pulling this report in the Excel file off of it into Excel, and added a projected PI by project as well as a projected PI by activity. In doing so, it's able to show both your program income plus your program funds budget, which equals a total project budget, and that total is what you see in DRGR. Again, you won't see this report in DRGR, but what we're showing you is how you can utilize the report, add some new columns in order to give you the analysis that you need to have for yourself. Lastly, and just to point really quickly, is a lot of folks have issues when voucher creators or voucher approvers are out of the office or user access and certification status. Again, always pull out the admin report. Again, 4B is, I find quite a great user information. You're able to get a recertification status information, the dates for recertification, who does it, which is your recertification approver, as well as the role that each person plays. So you're able to double check who else has those drawdown approver rights or who your grantee administrator is. Essential items to know as a user in DRGR. We've come to the end of our conversation here about the reports module. I know we've given you a lot to skim, as well as a lot, as we hope, of items that you can take back to your deck and click through, try different adaptations of graphs, try a public report to show a trend analysis for yourself and your directors. My big statement here before we get to Q&As is that I know you guys put a lot of time into DRGR in accurately reporting and constantly and continually making budgets that are correct and accurate, your obligations, you're drawing down funds, and you're entering information in QBRs. Because you put all that information in and you put in your diligence about that, use the reports module in order to take that information out easily for yourselves. So you don't have to create a whole new Excel documents if you can easily do this within a reports module. Let's go ahead and start with some of the Q&As. I'm going to just go through a couple of those on that have been written in, and then we'll take some of those that called in as well. So we have a really interesting question here that there have been a rumor, and while I have Ryan and Jim on this one, maybe we could answer this, that they have been hearing that IDIS might be used for MSP programs at some point in the future. And they were wondering, is that going to happen, that data will be transferred from DRG to IDIS? Is there any truth to this rumor? Do you guys have any knowledge of that?
So I think part of this comes from the closeout notice, which I believe is still being written and finalized. So what happens programming when NSP is done with? There's still going to be program income. They're still going to have to account for that. So I think one of the thoughts was that we would integrate IDIS into NSP into IDIS to a certain extent to allow for the management and reporting of program income using a program income. It's not been finalized as far as I know. As soon as those types of things are finalized, there will be an announcement made, a listserv, and probably even a webinar at the appropriate time.
Ryan, I guarantee that we will have a webinar on the closeout notice when it comes out.
Right. Thanks.
And that was from Hunter Kurtz, who is in charge of all these webinars. So any ideas you have on webinars or needs that you have, he's great at taking those in and trying to make sure he's all you out there get the correct and accurate information via the webinars. So that's great to hear. This is from a user that has an issue with the reports module. I have heard other people have had this issue as well. The they go into and try to access the reports module, there are the two folders that pop up. Excuse me, one is DRGR and one is IDIS. When they click onto DRGR, it actually takes them to their IDIS reports. And they're wondering why the system is doing that and how can they correct that. My experience, and Ryan and Jim, please feel free to jump in here. My suggestion on this one is I have your name here. I'm happy to take it down, and this remains an issue for you. And we've kicked that to Mark Mitchell, and he's looked into that issue for a couple of grantees. It's not a universal issue. It seems like more of a specific user or grantee issue. Do you know more about that, though, Jim or Ryan?
Well, and you're right. I do think it's pretty specific, and it's not across the board. Not everybody seems to run into that problem. I'm not entirely sure what's going on, why that's happening, but we do look at those instances where it does, and we try to diagnose what's happening and fix it behind the scenes. So my recommendation is, if you do run into that, just to email DRGR_help@HUD.gov, and take a quick screenshot to show what you're seeing, and just a brief summary of what's going on, and we'll look into it. If it's something that's extremely urgent, please let us know too. If you need to pull a report for something that's like an urgent report, we might be able to help you out as well.
Great. And can you repeat again that email address for everyone?
Sure. It's DRGR_help@HUD.gov.
So much. Operator, is anybody on the line trying to call in?
Currently, we have no phone questions.
Great. Feel free for us to keep going in the queue. I'm going to answer a few more questions that have come in over a written response. They're asking if they could put a range in for a report. What report could I do that? I'm not exactly sure which range you're looking at. Is that, a range for financial information? Is that, for example, you're trying to delineate, you only want to look at financial information for activities at a disbursement from $600,000 to $1 million, for example? I'm going to make that as kind of the assessment that you're looking at. You can do some of that. You would have to play around again with those metrics on the right-hand side, as well as pulling some of those metrics up into a page by. Okay, so what I would highly recommend you do is, again, based on what information you want to do the range for, you'll want to pull a report, for example, if you want the range for an activity type by financial information of draws. A great report, as I've kind of talked about here, is Student Report 5B, and so you can pull that report and see the different budgets and obligations and disbursements per activity lines. And those metrics, the budget and activity, obligation, and disbursement, you're able to pull some of those metrics up into a page by access, as well as move that around by sort and ascending. In doing so, I think that will help you delineate a little bit further that information, and by doing so as well, you export and also help with the ranges there. So I think you're going to have to think through the metrics on the right-hand side if you want to think about the ranges, and use that filter option, which that filter is the page by, and you should be able to start being able to find some delineating factors, which are the ranges you might be looking for. Jim or Ryan, have you ever tried any ranges and reports that I'm not aware of, or do you know any of reports that are coming out that are going to give some type of a range delineation?
I don't know of any. I've never really done that.
I haven't either.
It's a great question out there. I think it's that metrics is going to be your key element to evaluate.
And a lot of that type of work I would do in Excel. So I just export it and be able to. Excel, obviously, there's some functionality with MicroStrategy that you don't get with Excel. A little bit easier to move data around, things like that. But there's also some functionality that you get through Excel that you just don't get in MicroStrategy, and I think one of those would be ranges.
Very true. And I want to just repeat there and articulate again to folks, I know some people get a little bit afraid when they're in the reports module about moving data around or manipulating data. When you do so, make it very clear you are not changing your data back in DRGR. What you have done is pull data out of DRGR, but you're not going to be able to change any data by the reports module, or even if you pull a report out of the reports module and put it into a cell and you start changing in some of those cells, it does not correlate back to DRGR whatsoever. So if you're wanting, for example, to make some budget adjustments and you're doing so in the Excel document so you can map it out and plan out what you need to do, then you need to go back into the DRGR, for example, maybe in the drawdown modules and revise some vouchers that way. So I just want to make sure everyone really understands that clearly. Even with your MicroStrategy or with Excel, you are not changing your DRGR information at all. So in some ways, that is really good news because you have the freedom to really play around with ideas and manipulate them. The other thing, though, the downside to that is that you might make some changes and you're making the assumption that that happened in DRGR, and that is not the case. So I just always want to make sure people understand that very clearly. We have another question here that says several of the program income reports I have incorrect totals for several of the activities, and they're also showing incorrectly QPRs. However, the receipts that have been entered are showing up correctly in the report. How is this issue being resolved? I haven't heard that issue yet. Are you guys, have you heard this issue from HUD perspective?
Well, I've been working with Joseph on several issues. They have a very large grant, and they tend to run into some things that we might not see with other grantees. So as with any of these instances where there's data that doesn't look right, it's a matter of screenshots to DRGR_help, and Joseph actually has my email address as well. He sends screenshots to me, and that's fine. And if we find that there's an issue with data, we typically will send it on to our contractors to take a look and see what's going on. Sometimes the QPR might be, and the reports might be pulling data from the wrong tables. So these are all things that happen behind the scenes, and we've caught them before through these types of alerts from grantees. And if that's the case, then we'll get it fixed.
Great, thank you so much. We have a question here that asks, can you pull a report from a previous date? It's probably the most common question that's asked, so I'm really happy that you asked that of us. So you can't, ultimately. I can't, for example, pull Fin Report 5B from, last December, or even really from 2 days ago. What it does is it pulls the information as of today. Let me tell an exception to that, or just to understand a little bit more. There are some reports in the system that are clearly marked that talk about that they're pulling information from a certain QBR. I gave one example. I'm going to look for it right now as I'm talking, where it talked about that they're pulling information from X QPR date. In doing so, that is the one exception where it literally shows you by QPR, perhaps, which data information it's pulling from. That does not happen in every report, and unless it's clearly identified, you do not. It pulls information as of today. Here's the example that I was talking about here with the Perf Report 03. This is literally a Perf report that's titled QPR, Addresses by Activity and Responsible Organization. In doing so, it pulls today, as of what is in this grantee's information today by the grant member, all the information that's in there. What it does do as well, though, is tell you the date that that information was entered. So, for example, on the right-hand side, it tells you the reporting period beginning. That is the only kind of exceptions that I'm aware of that I see most commonly in the reports. But Ryan or Jim, do you guys see anything a little bit differently, or how are the examples of exceptions?
This is Jim. Now, but if there's a particular report that they know they're going to need on a regular basis for city council or whatever, that's where the subscription comes in very handy. You can set it up to subscribe to a particular report that you've already manipulated and got the page by the way you want it to and the columns in the right order and all that, and have it set, for example, every Monday morning. And as long as you go in sometime before the next Monday morning and export it to Excel or PDF and save it that way, you've got it. Because then the next, again, if you've got it set up for every Monday, the next Monday it will overwrite it. And that's the only way to really get a consistent set of snapshots over time.
And QPRs are now being overwritten. So if you the information that you enter in the most recent QPR will overwrite the previous QPRs. So if you were to go to look back at the previous QPR, it'll contain the new data. We do have, and I haven't really gotten into these too much, but we do have audit trail reports, and I'm not sure if they are for grantee users yet, if they're made available for grantee users. Jim, have you gotten into those at all?
No, I have not.
Those I believe show changes that have been made over the course of different reporting periods. But as far as going back and pulling data from Q1 2010, we can't really do that outside of these reports that do have the QPR report begin date in them. And there should be a financial report by quarter, and there should be a performance report by quarter.
And the last thing, too, I was thinking about, I think those are both great. Thanks for chiming in, guys. I think the one other thing, too, is the invoice reports that you can get off of the Fin report series. Many of them show dates to those as well. So a lot of them show dates that the voucher was created or revised or canceled, whatever the action that was taken on a voucher per line item. There are quite a few dates associated with those. So that's another item where it does show dates, although, again, it's going to tell you the current information as of today still. So it's not going to tell you what last week's information was. It'll tell you today, so it does also have dates associated with when that information was done. As for the audit trails, I haven't seen those yet shown up on grantee screens when I'm working with them and helping them, so we might want to just double check back with Mark and see. I either could be missing something or they haven't gone live yet, so we can go back and maybe check in with him on those.
Yeah, they're new with the most recent release. So.
And I don't believe specific audit trail reports have yet been created.
Yeah, I haven't seen them on the grantees access. Again, why I say grantees access here, guys, is that every user sees different reports. So field office, for those out there, many of them see different reports than a grantee, et cetera. Many of them see all the same reports. Sometimes field offices just get a few extra reports. Okay, so I have a long question here. Let me make sure I summarize it correctly. This is a follow-up to the comment I made where they said, okay, so how do I actually make changes in DRGR? For example, we've entered some properties originally as demolitions, which was activity 2 for them, and they were acquired by the city. Now they're in the rehab process, which is an activity 4. And, of course, they're using the same address, and so they're reporting it twice. I know you talked about this before, but how do I correct this? I'm trying to then, so basically, they have one address, for example, that was demoed, and they're using activity 2, for example, of demolition and all the budgets and the beneficiary and accomplishment data for activity 2 for demos. But that same property now they're also rehabbing, which is now their activity 4. They're using budgets instead of activity 4. So they're wanting to know we've reported this address twice, and what do we do about this? Happy to jump in here, Brian or Jim. Do you guys want to jump in here as well? I just want to make sure we get the most current information.
Well, there are really two alternatives. And the first alternative would be to collapse the activities. If you have demolitions as part of a rehab, they do not need to be their own activity in DRGR, and they can be a part of the rehab acquisition, rehab disposition activity. That requires, again, reassigning vouchers and receipts and beneficiary data, so it can be kind of complex. And if you're pretty far along in your program, you might not want to do that. The alternative would be to report report the beneficiary data for the primary activity, and the primary activity here would be the rehab. So what you would do would be to report, for example, with demolitions, the number of properties, and that's really it for the demolition activity. And then you'd report all of your beneficiary data, your households, housing units, so on, under the rehab, and all the FHEO data that goes along with that. What you want to do then would be to tie the two activities together with an address. And so when you report the address in the QPR, you'll want to just make sure you put the exact same address in. And this is where at HUD we can go in and we can say, okay, there are two activities taking place here. We're going to pull out the primary activity, and we can tie the two together based on that address. So just make a note in your narrative that this activity or this demolition activity is tied to the rehab activity with the rehab activity number. And I think that might be the best way to go for folks who are pretty far along. If this were to be like an NFP3 issue where they're just sort of getting started out, I'd recommend combining because you'd have less reporting to do, and it would be the time saver. So those are the two options.
Great, thanks. So I think the important part here is if you take that second option, Ryan's articulating very clearly that you will be having an address in two places, but you do not want to do your accomplishment data, your housing unit, your owner units, your beneficiary data in two places. You only want to do it at its end use, which is that rehab activity for this example. The next question, while I was talking, I was trying to get to it, was it asks which report, is there a report which shows my current program income balance available? So this question is somewhat twofold right now due to the recent changes in December. So you have total grant level program income balance. You might also have the program income account balances, so through your PI account balances. In DRGR, nowhere does it literally do the math for you and show your balance, but what it does do is show your totals, and those totals are delineated by what you have filtered or set your page by for, and then you can export it and do that math to figure out your balance. So let me just kind of put your eyes towards the one report I was thinking of in particular is the FIN Report 5B. I have an example of that, so I'll show that one second. And then the other one here is the FIN Report 5D, a new report that shows your program income account summary. And that report shows your program income accounts. It shows the sum of for each program income account, the sum of the budgets, the obligations, the program income received, and the program income dispersed. And so if, for example, you have a program income account, I'm going to pick on the state of Pennsylvania again because they do very, very good program income accounts that I know of. So, for example, if they have a program income account for the city of Lebanon, and they have 10 activities associated with that, this 5D report will show the city of Lebanon program income account, and it will sum for you the total budgets, the total allocations, program income received, and program income dispersed. What you could do then is export that report, into an Excel and do simple math of the program income received minus program income dispersed and your balance per account. If, however, you're wanting a grant level, I would recommend the 5B report. Here's an example of that where you have, again, your program income received and your program income dispersed. And if you pull that into an Excel document, you again can do your simple math of subtraction between the two and get that sum. You need to remember, though, anytime you do anything in the reports module, you want to double check what the page by axis looks like, because it will change these totals based on what your filter is. If, for example, your filter for this table, and this table was pulled into an Excel, so I no longer know exactly my page by it was pulled in Excel, and for example, it doesn't have my demolition activities, then it's not going to give you a full sum of all of your metrics, which are, for example, in this case, your budgets and obligations and disbursements. So you always want to triple check that page by axis ribbon to verify what your filter that is set. Again, many filters are set for you intuitively in MicroStrategy based on what HUD has put together. I find the most intuitive ones that they do are usually they set it up by grant number. So, for example, it's NSP 1 versus 2 versus 3, or if you have disaster recovery funds too. So there are some simple page buys. You see them right here. This page buy is part of the export document that you can get, and this gives you, they had 3 different delineators for page buy. One is grant status, one was who the grantee is, and one was a grant number associated with that grantee. So again, it's essential you always think about what is your filters, so these totals can be equivalent to what you want as part of your analysis. Operator, are there any calls standing by?
We have no phone questions at this time.
Right now, we don't have any other hands raised that I'm seeing. Feel free, we'll stay on the line for a few more minutes so if people still have questions.
Jeannie, we could probably talk a little bit more about the program income calculation, because this has come up a lot with grantees recently, and I think in particular when they get into the voucher screens. And the vouchers are showing them this available balance amount, and sometimes they know that they have a certain amount of program income available, but they're trying to draw down program income and program funds, and they'll get, they'll have a zero amount available. And I think the thing to keep in mind is that when you look at that screen, the first thing you can always do is you can click on the available balance amount, which is that dollar amount that's in the voucher. And that'll give you a table, and it's going to show you the calculations of how DRGR is coming up with what you have available to draw. And it's based on a number of variables, including obligations and how much program income you've receipted, how much program funds you have in a certain program income account, and how much program income you have in a certain program income account. And if you're looking at the entire voucher as one, and you're seeing zero amount for line item 1, and then you're seeing dollar amounts for the remainder, the thing to keep in mind is that DRGR is calculating that available amount by the line item. So it's saying that right now, based on this moment in time, for this particular line item, independent of any other line items, that's how much you can draw. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have funds available, but you might have program funds that you want to draw in one line item, and then you have program income that's remaining, and you want to draw the program income all the way down, and that would allow you to draw program funds as well. It's going to show up as zero, because at the point in time, you do have program income available still. So you need to typically break out that voucher. So you do program funds first, or program income first, and then your program funds for that one line item. That's the only thing that we can do right now for that. But I know that's confused a lot of grantees, especially those with program income accounts. And I'll be happy to take questions on it if we do have any questions. But that's just something to keep in mind right now, is that the calculations are done at the line item level, really, when you look at the voucher in DRGR.
Thanks, Ryan. And I think that key where he was talking about how do I figure that out, you can pull reports, but probably in that example, the best place to do it is when you create your voucher and you're starting to add the activities in, and you decide to add, for example, in this case, they might add the BEDC Alumni activity. When doing so, it pops up as part of your voucher creation. There's a available amount balance, and you actually can click on that available amount, that amount number, and it opens up another screen, and it gives you a table on how DRGR came to that available amount number. And it's really essential. I highly recommend that you start clicking on that anytime you have questions or concerns. It's not what you thought it would be, because it's a pretty informative table. I did warn you at times, sometimes it might take you a few times to get used to that table. I recommend the webinar we did in December. I can't remember the exact date, my apologies, but it's about mid-December. We gave a couple examples on how to read that table. So go ahead and go back to that. If you go to the NSP Resource Exchange and click on the Learning Center, there are tons of past webinars, and I recommend going to that December webinar and walking through the examples of that. I think that table is probably the most informative table you can use. This is one of those instances where probably the report's not as informative, but that table, when you click on available amount per each line item, I think that's the best to help you with that Ryan's talking about there.
Well, it's really tough to determine how much have available to draw by just looking at MicroStrategy reports, because it's probably not going to tell you accurately, because it's not factoring in, it's not doing the math in the reports, but it is doing the math in the vouchers. So that's where if you looking at that table, that available amount table, that can really come in handy.
We have another question here on DRGR reports. Before we get to that, though, we do have a question on the table. So I just wanted to reiterate, they asked where is that table to check the amount available. Again, that's per line item. But when you're in DRGR, and if you have a voucher creator rights, so you have to be able to have voucher creator rights. You have voucher creator rights and you start to build your voucher. You build your voucher by choosing both the activities number that you want to include, as well as if you're going to pull down program funds or program income. So it's both the activity number plus program fund or program income. In doing that, that builds your voucher. And by building your voucher, it gets to a page where it then gives you the available amount per each activity type and per each program type that you chose by activity type. Once you get there, that's where you click on that. I'm going to go ahead and go back to this question on addresses. A grantee has duplicate addresses that they have in the system. It's due to putting them into acquisition, and then again, when the beneficiary was placed in, for example, rehab. They're not sure if they understood a comment that was stated earlier in our webinar. Is HUD correcting these addresses? Does a grantee need to do this on their own? Do they need to request to be able to correct these addresses? Additionally, they have some incorrect spelling of street names. And so, again, they request that those incorrect street names to be corrected as well. So let's kind of dissect that a little bit. So Ryan was speaking to a little bit when HUD is doing their analysis, they go ahead and pull, again, they use MicroStrategy there, pull data out of the system, and then they do their own manipulation and deduplicate it. They do not go in DRGR and deduplicate anything in DRGR. I want to make that clear. They're not going into DRGR, into your own system and your records and changing your records in DRGR. What they've done is they've pulled reports off of MicroStrategy, and I think Ryan used the word sanitize them. And so they do that sanitizing. So there is no changes that happen to DRGR that I'm aware of. Is that correct, Ryan?
That's correct. Yeah, we don't go into the systems and make those changes, and we really highly discourage going back into the QPRs and changing data. It really, for address purposes, we typically don't do that. Everything that's done is done once we've exported the data, and we'll send it through what we have here is the Geocoding Service Center, and they do geocoding and mapping for us. And part of the software system that they have is it actually standardizes those addresses. So we get the addresses we need for the most part with a pretty good efficiency rate in the high 90% range. So it's not a huge deal to go back now. We do have a new feature now after the most recent release of DRGR that actually allows grantees, gives them the opportunity to validate their addresses as they entered into the QPR. And it'll show, you enter the address and you click validate, and it'll actually show with a degree of accuracy whether or not this has been basically geocoded. And it'll even show you a little pop-up map, so you can take a look and compare. Is this where we actually meant for this to be? So is this house where it belongs, or what is this demo? Is this where it actually took place? You can look at that on a map. So hopefully we'll be able to correct for some of the address entry issues going forward with that tool.
Right. So unfortunately, some of it, not highly recommended or able to kind of go back, but going forward, they've made this tool so they can help people with incorrect spelling of street names or items like that.
Right.
Someone asked, is there any information yet on what's going to happen with the program income and program funds left after NSP1 deadline ends? For example, can I combine NSP1 program income with NSP3 activities? And if so, is this documented in some place? It's my understanding that this is the type of information that would be part of the closeout guidelines, which is forthcoming from HUD. I'm not sure on HUD's end, on Hunter or Ryan or Jerry, are you guys aware of the time frame on those closeout guidelines?
Yeah, this is John.
John. Hi, John.
Hey, right into Hunter's office here. So we're working on this. I know we keep saying that, but it's complicated. And I think that for the time being, people should just assume that it's going to stay NSP money, for the foreseeable future. That, there may be a point, after closeout at some stage where it loses that character. But we are already anticipating that grantees will go a year and a half, 2 years or more beyond the expenditure deadline before we even reach the closeout stage, during which time they'll be spending program income if they have it and continuing to run their programs, hopefully. So, well in advance of any change, you'll be aware of it. I mean, we're hoping to get this guidance out in the next month or so, but I don't know, it's pretty brain damaging, frankly. So I think you should just, think about it as NSP money for now and just keep treating it that way. And if there's a change, you'll have plenty of notice on that. We're trying to make any changes in the direction of more flexible rather than less flexible, but none of this has been settled yet.
Thanks, John. Operator, is there any calls on the line right now?
Currently, we have no phone questioners.
Great. We do still have a few questions in our inbox. One question to follow up from the geocoding, which is that new feature that Ryan outlined, a new feature as of December that many of you may have seen in the past QPRs that were due. And they're asking, will the geocoding be able to verify addresses from new construction on vacant lots which did not have addresses before? It's a great question. Are you guys aware of that on the geocoding services, Ryan or Jim?
Well, I mean, the tool that's a part of the new release can't go back and verify anything that's already been entered, but it depends on how much information has been put in. And if there isn't enough information put in for an address previously, when we go to geocode it, it might not get geocoded. It really depends on how much is being entered. I mean, if it's sometimes we'll see, XXX Main Street with no address. They just know they're going to do something on Main Street, or they did something on Main Street. They didn't have an address for it. That's probably not going to get geocoded. What we will do is if there's a zip code that's been entered, we can typically geocode to what's called the centroid of a census tract. So we get some degree of accuracy, but we're not going to get down to that rooftop level that we would get if we had an actual address. So it's a bit of a limitation, but still, we would probably not go back and change that now unless there was a real compelling reason to do so.
Great. And it also indicates here, guys, that doesn't mean don't enter in that new address here when it hits that beneficiary status. Don't want you to enter it. It just means it might have some geocoding limitations here. Additional question we have is, we have expenditures where funds were used from our RLF, or revolving loan fund. However, we cannot link the expenditure with the activity code. Do we have to increase our budget at the activity level?
I'm not sure I followed the question.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand this too. I apologize. I just don't think I'm understanding what the activity code is relating to. However, in saying that RLF are very specific and not commonly used in NSP, and I don't want you to lose your question. What we'll ask you to do for the person that had this question, can you please submit this in the NSP FAQ? And I'll go ahead and highlight that here. If you go into the NSP Resource Exchange, you can submit a question via the Ask a Question box here. Please feel free to submit that. We'll follow that up with you and make sure, how about Ryan and I, we'll make sure we track this question, see if we can locate it in the next day or so and get back to you on this, and maybe we'll just need to put a call into you to make sure we fully understand the question. Don't want to leave you hanging there. Sorry about that. At this point, I'm not seeing any other questions in the queue. Is there any questions, operator, online that we've missed?
No, we still have no phone questions.
Great. Anything else that we need to know just to close out here for everyone's time sensitive for any upcoming DRGR enhancements? Or are we pretty in the clear for a while now as people get used to the DRGR enhancements during December?
Jane, you want to take that one?
There is another release coming out in the next few weeks. It mostly deals with the TA module, so should not affect grantees. But there are also some known issues that developed with the release in December, and we're trying to get those all in to address those, get them fixed in this release. We do not yet have a date.
One of the biggest issues that we've seen, I guess the most pressing that really needs to get fixed, is that we've seen in some situations when grantees are revising vouchers and or receipts, there's the amount that they're revising from, the amount that, that's coming from a previous voucher going to a different activity, is sometimes remaining, and it's we've been calling them phantom amounts basically, because just all along in the system it doubles up really the amount shown as either being dispersed or being receipted, and it's inaccurate. So in those cases where you happen to notice that if you revise a voucher or receipt and you still have that same amount showing up in your system, then please again send screenshots if you can, and just a quick summary to DRGR_help@HUD.gov, and we'll log that with the rest of the issues, and hopefully our contractor will be able to take care of it quickly.
Great. Thanks so much, you guys. So for our parting advice, questions or concerns you have, there's a few resources you can utilize. DRGR_help@HUD.gov. If you kind of want a longer perspective of TA around this, remote TA, you can also go to the NSP Resource Exchange and request technical assistance. There is also quite a bit of information, FAQs, on the Resource Exchange you can access yourselves by, again, the Resource Exchange and looking up the FAQs, which are sorted in a new way this time around, which is great. It's very easy to access those DRGR questions. There's also on Community Connections, which is called comcon.org. Again, comcon.org. There's a DRGR site on comcon.org, and that also has a huge database, what they call it the knowledge base, that gives up-to-the-minute information on DRGR. It's not specifically NSP, but it's DRGR-based, and many of you in the system need information that is also just on how do you access something in DRGR. It doesn't have to